Hello, horror fans, and welcome back to the Script to Screen podcast, where we delve into the spine tingling world of horror cinema. Each week, we look at the scariest scenes, unmask the deeper meanings behind your favourite horror films, and explore the psychology of fear that keeps us coming back for more.
From script analysis to scene breakdowns, we'll be dissecting your favorite horror movies to see just what makes them tick. So whether you're a seasoned horror aficionado or just starting to explore the genre, join us as we unravel the spine-tingling stories that haunt the silver screen.
I'm Will.
And I'm Lee.
It's good to be back, Lee. So what have you been watching this week?
This week, I saw The Substance and absolutely loved it.
Ooh.
It's such a great movie, and I think Demi Moore absolutely kills it. The final act is so balls to the wall crazy. It should literally be studied by future generations. That's how.
I haven't managed to catch that one yet, but it is something I'm sort of looking to go and see, hopefully in the cinema. So we'll see how that works out. I've been on holiday, Lee, as I said, so I haven't had a chance to catch too much, but I did take a little nostalgic journey and rewatch some classic Hong Kong action movies, both of them starring Sammo Hung. The first one was The Odd Couple, and the second one was The Prodigal Son. I don't know if you've seen those at all.
Prodigal Son rings a bell. I definitely,
Mm,
when I was younger, did go through a phase of watching quite a lot of those ones. The Sammo
yeah,
Hungs, the Jackie Chans, the Yun Biao.
yeah, Yun Biao,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah.
know how to pronounce his name, but did you ever read Jackie Chan's autobiography?
No, but I have it on my shelf actually to
Ah,
read.
it's
I
really
haven't got
good.
around to it.
It's really cool. It kind of like talks about them all when they were like in this like Chinese dance school, and
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Sammo
Opera
kind of
school.
Sammo. I think he kind of like he breaks his leg or something, and that's when he kind of piles all the weight on,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
There's
he kind
actually a
of
film called Painted Faces, which is
yeah.
about that kind of period.
Oh,
And
wicked.
they were called the Seven Little Fortunes. They
Hmm.
used to be a troupe that went out and sort of performed.
Yes.
And Sammo
Yeah.
Hung plays his master from back in the day.
Brilliant. I'll have to keep an eye out for that.
Yeah. Anyway, what I was gonna say, Lee, was the Prodigal Son for me is the best example of kind of empty hand martial arts combat ever put on
Hmm.
screen.
Yeah.
And The Odd Couple is the best example for me of kind of weapons
Yeah.
choreography ever put on film. So watching
Oh,
those
wow.
two is it's a great double header.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. I shall
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
have to keep an eye out for those then, definitely. That's cool. So what are we looking at this week? What is up for dissection?
Well, Lee, this week we're looking at the criminally underrated 1996 classic Bad Moon.
Nice. Written and directed by Eric Red, whose contributions to the genre are pretty much legendary, to be honest, with renowned classics like Near Dark and The Hitcher, as well as some lesser known gems like Cohen and Tate, Blue Steel, and the hugely enjoyable Jeff Fahey movie Body Parts.
Oh man, that's one hell of a resume. So has he done anything recently or?
Well, he's a successful author. He has a small catalogue of novels, and according to IMDb, his latest movie, A Man versus Sasquatch Tale, called No Man's Ridge, has been in pre-production since 2021. So I'm hoping it hasn't been lost to development hell.
It sounds like it may have been lost. To be fair.
It does, but
Sounds
I'll
like it
keep
may
my
have been
fingers
lost.
crossed.
Yeah, it does sound pretty awesome. I mean, who doesn't love a man versus Sasquatch movie, right?
Yeah, there's too few of them. There's too few of them. Fingers crossed. Anyway, it'll see daylight soon. But back to Bad Moon, we're going to be comparing the film to the shooting script, which is dated 21st of the 3rd, 1996.
And so this is based off a novel. Am I correct in saying that?
You are indeed, yeah. Red wrote the script based on the 1994 novel by Wayne Smith. And while we will be focusing mainly on the script to screen comparisons, I am going to throw in a few tidbits from the novel here and there as well.
Pulling double duty this week, Lee. Well done.
Well, it's a great film, great script, and it's a really, really great book. So it's hardly a chore. And as always, we are looking at these scripts purely for educational purposes, and they remain the sole property of their original authors and owners.
Awesome. So without further ado, let's take a deep dive into Bad Moon. A devoted family dog battles to protect his owners from the seemingly innocuous Uncle Ted, who holds a terrifying secret that threatens to quite literally tear his family apart. We open in the jungles of Nepal. Ted and Marjorie plan their next adventure before retiring to their tent for the evening. Ted, of course, is played by legend of the small screen, Michael Parr, and Marjorie by the quite lovely Joanna Marlowe.
Yeah, let's not get too attached to Marjorie, though, eh? In the script, they aren't referred to by name yet, simply as photographer and naturalist, which is kind of an odd choice, but you know. Everything plays mostly the same on the page, although we lose a little bit of dialogue between the two. It's basic stuff, but it does kind of reinforce that there's quite a strong connection and deep love between them both.
The native guides chuckle to themselves as Ted and Marjorie engage in some 90s on screen erotica under the light of the full moon. Their mood quickly changes when they hear something in the woods.
In the script, however, the jungle goes completely silent.
On screen, the horses panic and bolt, as do most of the guides, save for one plucky chap who goes for his gun but is cut down by an unseen foe.
Yeah, in the script, it simply states that a werewolf drops from the trees and kills him, which gives us our monster reveal just very slightly earlier.
Meanwhile, Ted and Marjorie are still in the throes of passion when the shit hits the fan. First revealed in silhouette form, the werewolf tears open the tent, drags the poor Marjorie out, and proceeds to tear her to pieces. Lee.
Yeah, the werewolves in this film are savage as fuck.
Really starts the movie with a bang.
Hey, but
So Ted is wounded, trying to heroically trying to save Marjorie, and managed to crawl to his shotgun and blow the lethal lycanthrope's head clean off. Lee.
nice. I mean, this plays almost identically to the script, although we do lose a cringeworthy "Did you hear something?" line. And also, Marjorie screams Ted's name briefly before being absolutely massacred. And we get Ted committing what we've been taught is a cardinal sin of screenwriting dialogue, a long, drawn out no.
I'm getting flashbacks of Star Wars. How many O's are in there, Lee?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5. No. Then we transition to the titles, and the opening scene is done.
Nice. Pretty in line with what's on the page so far. The opening scene runs for about 4 minutes and it takes up about 6 pages in the script.
It's quite an opener, isn't it?
Well, if you can't hook a viewer with some sex and gore, then you've pretty much got no hope at all.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it is, I mean, it is surprisingly brutal, this, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, and let's touch on the werewolf design here. I mean, seriously, how good is that werewolf design?
Well, I imagine it's very realistic, not having seen a werewolf, but I imagine it's fairly realistic. I kind of have to say, kind of comical in a way, and it's somewhat against the norm to show the monster so much so early in the film. But
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does go against the whole keep your monster in the shadows to keep it scary idea, doesn't it?
yeah, do you think that works for or against the film? What do you think?
I'll be honest, I think it's handled really well here. I mean, Red knows from the outset that film's protagonist is going to be somewhat hindered throughout the film. So he can afford to show his hand quite early on and still keep all the human cast largely in the dark.
Now, from the Nepalese jungle, we transition to the forests of Washington State. Looks absolutely gorgeous, where we meet young Brett Harrison, played by former Dennis the Menace, Mason Gamble, and his lovable German shepherd, Thor.
Now, I just want to go on record here and say that Thor may well be the goodest boy ever.
Well, I can't argue with that at all, Lee. He's a very good boy.
I know. I want to talk about Thor for a second here. I mean, he was actually played by 3 different dogs during the course of the film. The one you see most often is called Primo, and he was used for all the face shots and the main acting moments. But for the quieter moments where Thor is sleeping or for over the shoulder shots, an experienced female stage dog named Decca was used.
So you mentioned 3 dogs?
Oh, we'll get to the last one later. It's worth the wait.
Okie dokie. Can't wait to hear about that.
I mean, the script is full of little moments described from Thor's point of view, which in the script play out in black and white.
So here's an example. This is taken from the script, and this is how those POVs appear in the script. So Thor, POV, black and white. His vision is heightened, ultra aware. The sounds of the birds and wildlife in the forest at the edge of the neighborhood are dense and detailed in this stereophonic dub. Distant cars and trucks and voices of neighbors in their houses are clearly heard. Now, his vision focuses on the baseball hissing through the air at him. So, worth noting, this is all capitalized as you would for a shop description. And in the finished film, Thor's POVs appear in color. That said, playtime is cut short when the boy is approached by a shifty looking stranger.
Yeah, very, very shifty looking stranger indeed.
There's a lovely little visual of the dog placing himself between the man and the boy here. It's clear that this chap is up to no good.
He is almost comically unsavory, isn't he?
He is very unsavory looking. It's here we're introduced to Brett's mother, Janet Harrison, played by the ever lovely Mariel Hemingway.
Who I recognized immediately from Superman 4, A Quest for Peace.
Immediately forgotten that film for me. I always think of her from Manhattan. Anyway, which I think we can all agree that Superman 4 Quest for Peace is a great addition to the franchise.
Yeah, I think we both remember Superman 4 very differently. But hey, after the robot woman from Superman 3 traumatized me for life, A Quest for Peace was a welcome distraction.
Okay, so I have to pause for a second. So Superman 3 scarred you for life?
Dude, I still cannot watch that scene without feeling physically sick. It is literally burned into my brain nightmare fuel.
That's Superman 3?
Anyway, back to the script. And we are treated to several Thor POVs as he sizes the guy up.
The man half-heartedly tries to sell some encyclopedia and subtly antagonizes Thor until he barks aggressively, and as Janet tries to restrain him, the man feints to strike at her, causing Thor to leap to the attack, and there's a great shot of the dog with his teeth inches from the man's face.
Yeah, I mean, with a few additions of Thor's POV, this is pretty much on point with the script.
So the penny quickly drops, and we learn that this shyster is a Flopsy Lee. Not something I've ever heard of. Someone who fakes injury to make money off an out of court settlement. Damn Flopsy. But he's picked on the wrong woman because Janet whips out her business card and we learn she is, in fact, a lawyer.
Dun dun. No real deviation from the script here. And I think it's a nice way to tell us about Janet and her character.
Do you think this comes off a little cringy?
Yeah, it definitely reads better in the script, but I think it's just down to the delivery. I mean, the book differs massively here. Janet plays second fiddle to her husband, who is actually the lawyer and the one who threatens Flopsy with a sexual harassment charge against his wife. And young Brett also has an older brother and a younger sister, and there's also a little kitten running around as well.
Oh. I just want to mention Rothgar Matthews, who plays the duplicitous Flopsy here. His facial expressions and his mannerisms, just his whole demeanor is totally, totally on point.
Yeah. I mean, after this unfolds in the script, Janet takes Thor inside and gives him a stern talking to. She insists that Thor must never bite anyone lest he be labeled a bad dog.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this segues into a flashback for Thor, where he remembers his time in the Pound. And in the book, it's also made clear that being a bad dog is, as far as Thor is concerned, a fate worse than death.
So the flashback reads as follows. A memory flashback plays in front of the dog's eyes. A pound. Through the bars of a white cage, other white cells beyond. It is as sterile, antiseptic, and cold as a concentration camp. Many pathetic animals howling and barking and meowing. Thor is inside the cage looking out as men in white suits pass like angels of death. Pound attendants. Bad dog. Bad dog. Thor is off in space. Mum shakes him gently. Janet, you listening to me, Thor? You're not a bad dog. You're a good dog. Hear me? Good dog. Thor gazes dreamily at Mum. Thor POV. B&W, I assume means black and white. Still in the Pound, behind bars. People are moving past the bars. It is Mum and Brett. They peer through the bars at Thor. Brett. Oh, Mommy. Look at this puppy. Mommy, I want this one. Can I have him? Mum pokes her face over and looks in the bars at the camera. Janet, it's a German Shepherd. The gate is opened. The boy pats the camera. Janet, good dog, good dog. We'll take him. Good dog. Thor's eyes are wet. Mum and Brett are on the carpet with him. They scratch and pat him. Janet, good dog. Thor gratefully licks their faces, relieved.
Emotional damage.
Well, to be a dog, eh? So this scene isn't in the film, and I'm sensing that a lot of the dog's POV stuff was removed so that the human cast remained the center of the story.
Yeah, quite possibly. I think so. Yeah.
So we get a lovely scene of Thor checking in on the family before curling up to sleep beside the fire.
This is pretty much lifted from the script. I like the way Janet is still working in bed. That's a cool little character moment.
Dedicated lady. We then move to the woods, and it's another full moon. A forestry agent measures trees alonely.
He's not doing a very good job.
I'm sensing some doubt as to his measuring abilities.
All I'm saying is that if I measured those trees, I guarantee I would get a different measurement than that guy. I mean, he clearly is taking no pride in his work.
Well, his measuring is cut short by an eerie growl, and he takes off into the trees, as you would. His escape seems successful, but then something white and goopy drips on him from above, and we get a snapshot of wicked jaws popping his head like a melon leaf.
Yeah, I wasn't the only one that thought that drippy goop looked a little bit sus, right?
Makes you wonder what the werewolf was doing up that tree. Maybe he was just annoyed and having a climactic moment ruined, eh?
Yeah. I mean, in the script, the scene is quite different. For a start, it's a lost hiker trekking through the woods, and once again, the script uses that whole "woods go silent" trick, which I think is a shame was never used. It would have made a great calling card for the audiences to pick up on, like an instant way to create tension in the viewers, you know. But anyway, we also see the werewolf smashing through trees and bushes as it chases the guy down, and it kind of gives a great sense of the creature's power because it literally bulldozes straight through the woods for this poor guy. He eventually climbs a tree, but the werewolf literally chews through the trunk and rips the guy to pieces after the tree falls. And I much prefer the written scene over what was shot here.
Hmm. All I'll say is if we establish this early, the werewolf can chomp through tree trunks. It makes some precautions taken later in the film completely pointless. But I agree, a visceral hiker death may have been more effective. Anyway, back at the Harrison house, Janet gets a call from her younger brother, Ted, to let her know he's back in the country, and she agrees to drive out to meet him.
The script goes into a lot of detail here. It begins with Janet making sure Brett does his homework. And during the call, we see Thor's ears prick up at the mention of Ted's name. I mean, he gets very excited. So it's clear that he knows Ted, and B, he loves Ted very much. And we also get a terrible line of dialogue from Janet, which goes, Janet, gosh, I didn't even know he'd got back. That flaky brother of mine.
Gosh, Lee, that's pretty bad. Is she talking? Is she talking to Brett here?
Oh gosh, it's not really clear, but I think she's talking to herself.
That's pretty flaky of her. We get some lovely scenic shots of the American wilderness as the family travel to meet Uncle Ted, who is living out of an airstream in the woods.
And there's another cool Thor POV where he experiences the rush from sticking his head out the car window. It's also in the film, but it doesn't quite convey the experience as well as the script does.
The family arrive at the idyllic lake where Ted has parked up his trailer, and Thor is especially pleased to see him. It's hugs all round as Ted takes Janet and Brett inside while Thor heads off into the woods on the trail of something. Sapare plays it great here. He's got this uneasy look at Thor as Thor heads off into the woods.
I know. I mean, I think he's so good in this film. The scene plays out largely as in the script, but minus a really cool POV moment from Thor.
The scene from the script reads as follows. Uncle Ted, hi, Thor. Thor drops back, hackles up, and this is capitalized now. The sound of Uncle Ted's voice has an animal-like cadence, a low, wolf-like growl beneath the words. Not quite Right. We recognize Uncle Ted as the photographer who was attacked by the werewolf in the opening scene in Nepal. Uncle Ted misses a beat, a flash of caution. Then he catches himself and kneels down to rub the scruff of the dog's neck.
It's interesting also that it's only here in the script we learn that Ted and the photographer are one and the same. There's also a really cool moment in the script where Ted shows off his now healed werewolf wound to impress Brett, which I think is totally the kind of thing that a cool uncle would do.
Yeah, sure.
Also in the script, Thor discovers a pile of torn clothes and follows the scent from them into the woods.
So back on the screen, Ted and Janet share a tender moment and some super on the nose dialogue about how Janet's a successful lawyer and a single mum. It's enough to make Ted proud. But then in a really cool moment, Janet comes out with, "You're not telling me something." It's a really nice kind of big sisterly line that breaks Ted down, and he admits things aren't going well for him. "Marjorie's gone," he says.
No shit.
Yep. So back in the Airstream, and Brett discovers Uncle Ted's stash of werewolf memorabilia and a delightfully ancient looking book about werewolves. Meanwhile, Thor is following the trail in the woods. He sniffs something. Jump scare. A flock of birds startles him.
At least it wasn't a cat.
That is true. That is true. I don't think it would have ended well for a cat to jump scare Thor. Our canine hero looks up into the trees to discover the remains of the forestry agent Lee.
In the script, a severed arm lands on him, but this makes so much more sense because, I mean, if he'd found a severed arm, he could have just brought it back and showed everybody and alerted his family to the danger. Plus, I think it's clear Uncle Ted is a fan of Predator, stashing his kills in the treetops away from prying eyes.
Absolutely. So back in the Airstream, and Thor returns to check on Brett, leading to a wicked standoff between him and Ted, with Uncle Ted subtly asserting dominance over a wary Thor and dropping some great lines. "We're two of a kind, aren't we, old pal?" And he knows an old dog when he sees one.
It's great, absolutely great. Yeah, this scene is largely as written, with a few throwaway lines of dialogue removed, but nothing major.
So Ted notes how late it's getting and quickly ushers Janet and Brett to their car. He promises to visit soon. This is a really cool moment. You see the fear in Pare's eyes as he bundles them into the car and off to safety.
Yeah, I mean, he's great in this film. This scene is similar to the script, only we get a little bit more emphasis on how late it's getting and how Ted has lost track of time.
Yeah, so back at the Harrison house, and Janet is hard at work when Ted calls. Things aren't going so good up at the lake, and the place is flooded with cops and hunters. He agrees to come and park his trailer in Janet's backyard. Again, Pare is just killing it here. The emotion is just oozing from him.
Yeah, I mean, is it guilt or fear he's expressing here, do you think?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think it's probably a bit of both, but guilt would seem to play with what comes later. It does really serve to build some tension in the audience, though, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in the script, Thor is like seriously freaked out after his encounter with Ted. He spends the day just kind of staring off into the distance, and that is until he hears Janet say Ted's name on the phone and he freaks out.
So Ted's Airstream now sits in Janet's backyard. The two share some bonding time inside, and Thor's investigation uncovers a pair of maximum strength handcuffs. Janet is quick to mock her little brother, who laughs it off, explaining that it isn't what it looks like. But the sun is setting, Lee, so Ted states that he's going to go out for a night run.
Yeah, pretty much as written here.
Yeah. So Thor watches the Airstream from inside the house as Uncle Ted emerges and heads off into the forest, handcuffs in hand. Meanwhile, Janet is working from her bed.
Always working, Janet. I think nice show, don't tell on the character, I think.
Thor goes crazy downstairs. Janet reluctantly lets him out and he bolts off into the woods.
Yeah, in the script, it's made apparent that he hears something in the woods and he's warning it to stay away, and at the same time, warning the family to stay inside the house.
Yeah, that's really cool. But I guess there's no real way to get that across on screen, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's all there on screen, but I guess you've just got to try and think of it from a dog's eye view, I suppose.
Yeah, I'll just have a really good sort of knowledge of canine body language.
Mm.
So our canine hero plunges deeper into the woods where he comes upon Uncle Ted in full werewolf form, chained to a tree. Thor is clearly scared, but still attempts to assert himself with very little success, Lee.
Yeah, again, I know you're not a huge fan of the design, but I mean, I still think, how good does this werewolf look? I mean, it's all lips and fangs and those eyes, man. I mean, it doesn't just look scary, it actually looks evil and psychotic.
So Janet calls Thor away, and despite his begging, she refuses to investigate further and drags him home.
I know, you can almost hear his little dog voice going, Mom, you gotta see this shit for real. Come here, just have a look.
Come on, look at this.
Yeah, I mean, in the script, we go into a lot more detail about the werewolf and Thor's reaction. It basically describes the beast as rage-filled and psychotic, something that, as I just alluded to, I think definitely carries over into the creature's design. It's a creature kind of basically fueled by hate, and which overrides even the most basic of its animal reasoning. It's not portrayed as like an animal; it's portrayed as like a psychotic killing machine, rather than like something natural. We also see in the script that the handcuff key is on a chain around the creature's neck, and unless I missed it, we don't see that here. But I'm going to kind of peg this around about the end of Act One. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I was watching, I thought Ted moving to the backyard was probably the end of Act One. But yeah, I mean, you could be right. Yeah, it's all pretty subjective, I think. So the next morning, Janet catches a news flash about 5 hikers who've been killed up by the lake by some kind of animal, Lee, some kind of animal. Thor
Animal.
marks his territory by urinating, good on you, Thor, on Uncle Ted's trailer.
Yeah. In the script, we get a nice scene of Janet and Thor bonding the following morning. Thor knows that he's in the doghouse for keeping the family awake, and he's keen to re-establish his place in the pack. And it's a scene that reads very much like something out of the book.
So is there a lot of this sort of stuff in the book, Lee?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole novel, the whole thing is written from Thor's point of view, and it's quite fascinating. I mean, like he recognizes certain words, for example, but not the concept of words. Instead, he associates them with people or feelings, and he has a real hard time understanding the phone, for example. He just regards it as something that people talk to as if it was another person, if you will. And it's like he forgets things really quickly. Like if the werewolf is like out of his mind for too long, he just kind of forgets about it and gets distracted by like a squirrel or kind of something else, which is
That's
kind of
cool.
cool.
Yeah, it sounds cool. I mean, I remember when I was watching this, I was, sort of didn't know that it was based on a book, but I mean, it sounds like a fascinating read. I'll probably have to have a
Mm.
little look at it,
I highly recommend it. It's really enjoyable. It's one of those books that you just kind of, it's not a chore to read it, just kind of get through it quite quickly. I think I got through it in like 2 nights.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. Well, back to the movie, and Ted emerges from his trailer to be met with a warning growl from Thor. Ted notes that the dog has marked his trailer, and this is from the script. Uncle Ted steps out onto the landing, looking like hell, looking like, well, a bad dog. Ted sniffs the air, displeased. He looks at the tire of his trailer that Thor peed on. He looks down at Thor. So Janet emerges from the house and confronts Ted about the killings at the lake. She insists he stay with them until the curfew is lifted. After she leaves, Thor and Ted face off.
Yeah, I mean, this is a cool scene for me. It's kind of like Ted realizes here that there's only room for one dog in the pack and that Thor has him completely sussed out. I mean, in the script, also, as you read, it's more obvious that Ted smells Thor's marking of his trailer, whereas on the screen, it looks like he just kind of spots it.
Yeah, so back in the house, Ted joins Brett, who's watching the old black and white Wolfman of London. Ted picks apart the dated werewolf lore. Why a full moon? Why not any moon? And as for silver bullets, he reckons blowing one's head off with a shotgun would do the trick just as well. Brett isn't impressed with Ted's unorthodox werewolf lore, so Ted heads over to Janet and asks about what happened last night. She tells him about how Thor went off on something in the woods, and in another sublime effort from Pare, he tells her to listen to the dog and keep out of the woods at night, all of them. Uncle Ted, Oh, Janet, I shouldn't be here. I really should not be anywhere near here. He takes a deep breath, fighting an urge he can't resist. Uncle Ted, I'm leaving. Today.
And he was absolutely killing it in this scene. The script goes into more detail and also shows us that Ted's wrists haven't completely healed from the previous night. And that's an important note that will come into play later. Injuries from his werewolf form carry over into his human one. And this dialogue also is pretty much lifted straight from the book. And as I said, it's such a good book. I highly recommend people to check it out. Even if you've seen the film, read the script, there are more than enough like differences and subtleties to make it worth your while.
So, for your listening pleasure, here is that scene written. Uncle Ted looks Janet in the eye. Uncle Ted, I didn't cut my wrists. Uncle Ted cracks a nihilistic grin. Uncle Ted, believe me when I tell you, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. Janet stares through her brother's head. She touches her brother's shoulder and massages it in a sisterly fashion. Janet, promise me. Promise me you'll stay here until you work things out, please. Thor watches the proceedings with mortal dread, a low whimper escaping him as he realizes the depth of Mum's attachment to her brother. Uncle Ted turns. He puts his face in his hands. He doesn't cry. He just stands that way for what seems like an eternity, thinking. Then he draws his finger slowly down and off his face. Uncle Ted, I'll try. They hug again. Uncle Ted shoots Thor a spooky glance, freeze frame on the man's eye. Ted, you look me in the eye. Ted doesn't look up. Janet, look me in the eye and you tell me that you didn't cut your wrists.
Yeah, the script definitely paints Ted in a more sympathetic light. I mean, he's really struggling to do the right thing here.
So back to the screen, and Thor stands guard outside the Airstream. When Ted exits to make for the woods, he's unnerved by Thor and heads back inside. And what follows here is a masterful scene where man and dog struggle to get the mental upper hand on one another. Uncle Ted eventually gets the nerve to walk past Thor, but the dog is not letting him out of his sight. Pare stated during an interview that when the camera was on Primo and not on him, he'd pull faces and make little noises to confuse and intrigue the dog. So hence Thor giving him such strange looks and giving the impression that the dog is kind of deep in thought. So eventually Ted calls for Janet, who orders Thor inside.
Yeah, I mean, Red does a really great job of showing the dog's torment here. You know, he's torn between obeying his mom and like watching over Ted. And in all honesty, I think it's kind of Thor's fault that everything kind of goes south here. I mean, not that he knows any better, of course, but if he just left Ted to his own devices, he'd have chained himself up for the night and all would have been well.
Oh, that doesn't sound good. So back in the house, Thor barks until Brett lets him outside, and once through the door, he's off like a rocket. He sniffs out Ted's trail, locating his torn clothes, trainers, and the handcuffs. Lee. Thor bolts
Uh-oh.
for the house. The werewolf is crossing the yard as Thor attacks. During the fight, Janet wakes up and turns on the exterior floodlights, sending the werewolf fleeing back into the woods.
Yeah, I mean, in the script, the fight is a lot more brutal, and Thor takes a hell of a beatdown, bless him. As the werewolf flees, Thor seizes the moment to rip out the tendons of its ankle and takes a claw swipe to the face for good measure. Also in the script, Brett actually witnesses the whole thing from his window and is suitably terrified. Poor lad.
Back to the movie, and Janet calls the sheriff while Thor literally lies on top of a sleeping Brett to keep him secure and under guard. Janet heads out to check on Ted, but he's obviously AWOL. She heads inside the trailer and finds a photo of the mutilated body of poor Marjorie. Lee.
Yeah, I mean, I know Ted's a photographer, but why would you take photographs of your murdered lover?
He's a goddamn pervert werewolf, that's why. Judging by Janet's reaction, he took more than one. Janet reads Ted's diary about how he blacks out and wakes up in the woods covered in covered in blood.
It's just not ringing any alarm bells for her. I mean, come on.
She exits the trailer and heads back into the house, but something is lurking, and it's Flopsy Lee. He's back for revenge, packing a meat cleaver and a juicy steak as he heads for Thor's kennel.
What the actual fuck? Seriously.
Nobody makes a fool out of Flopsy Lee. He reaches the kennel and, tries to coax out Thor with, "Here, doggy, you know what's coming next."
Oh, yeah.
The werewolf. The werewolf looms behind him, Lee. He turns and gives us a hilariously awful "Wah!" before being torn apart by the beast.
Oh, man. That was fucking hilarious. The guy hadn't even changed his clothes from earlier.
It's probably been days by this point, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so how does the script handle this, Lee?
Well, first off, we get a scene with Janet insisting to Brett that werewolves aren't real and that he imagined the whole thing after watching the Werewolf of London movie. Then she heads to Ted's trailer, finds the pictures. She also finds pictures of the mutilated guide, and Ted's diary goes into a little bit more detail about what happened in Nepal. It also mentions that Ted's dreams are always in black and white, which would have been a really cool moment if they'd actually sort of included that, and if they'd been shooting Thor's POV scenes in black and white as well. I think that
Yeah,
would have been
totally.
cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we get the scene with Flopsy, although on the page he is in disguise of sorts, and we don't get the what? And instead he utters the immortal line, "Bull fucking shit," and actually goes for the werewolf with the cleaver.
That's kind of badass.
Yeah, I think that's probably why they didn't film it like that. I mean, you don't want to give this obviously unbelievably creepy guy any redeeming moments.
Yeah, maybe. It might just be to keep things in keeping with his general pathetic Weasleyness. Could be.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. He gets messed up pretty bad from the werewolf and flees to the woods out into the road where he is promptly hit and killed by the sheriff's police cruiser.
Now, the following morning, Thor watches from the house as Ted returns to his trailer. Sheriff Jensen arrives and breaks the news that Flopsy was found torn up 100 yards down the road. Janet asks about the killings up by the lake. Could a human have done it, Lee? The sheriff replies that only a large animal could have torn people apart like that. He then warns that if Thor did attack Flopsy, he'll have tasted human blood now, and that'll make him dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, the script handles this slightly differently due to the differing way in which Flopsy was killed. I mean, the sheriff informs her that he hit the man with his car, but it absolutely wasn't that what killed him. It was the animal attack, which it probably was, but to me, it just reads like the sheriff is trying to cover his ass. But in the book, though, we never actually see Flopsy again, although he does proceed with his threatened legal action, which ultimately sees him being paid off by Janet's husband, who obviously isn't in the film.
Well, anyway, back to the film, and Janet lets Thor outside and watches him go straight to the Airstream. She knows something is wrong with Ted, but understandably hasn't quite put the pieces together.
Yeah, I mean, in the script, there's a really heartbreaking scene where Thor senses that his mum is afraid of him, and he is absolutely shocked because he has no idea why.
Oh, man. I mean, touching, isn't it? But it's tough to
Yeah,
translate out on screen.
yeah, absolutely.
So the trailer opens, and out comes Uncle Ted. He stares Thor down, and Janet hurries over, demanding to know where he was last night. Ted is evasive, his eyes still on Thor. He gives the dog a sly wink, and Thor attacks Lee. He goes for the throat, misses, and bites down on Ted's arm. Janet manages to drag him away and lock him in the laundry room.
Yeah, I mean, in the script, Ted deliberately draws Thor's attention to his bitten ankle before winking at him, so it's a little bit clearer why Thor instantly attacks him. And also, when dragging Thor away, Janet calls him a bad dog, which unleashes more harsh flashbacks and doggy
Oh,
trauma.
oh.
In the book, though, Thor's reasoning is explained in a little more detail. I mean, Ted has just like decapitated and killed the family kitten. And until now, Thor has only kind of suspected that Uncle Ted and what Thor sees as the bad thing. He doesn't know it's a werewolf. He just thinks of it as the bad thing. So he wasn't sure that they're both sort of one and the same. But Thor knows that he kind of hobbled it. He kind of tore its ankle out like the night before. So he decides that he's going to check out Ted's ankle. And if it is him, he's just going to go straight for the throat and kill him to protect the family, even though he knows it's going to get him sent to the pound. Yeah, and he sniffs out the werewolf's blood in Ted's wound, and literally does go straight for his throat. Unfortunately, like the dad is able to pull him away, and Thor is sent to the pound, where he is completely emotionally broken.
Oh, it's just heartbreaking stuff, isn't it? And things
Yeah,
get worse. So Thor is taken away by animal control while his family look on helplessly.
yeah. I peg Act 3 to start here. What do you think?
Yep, totally agree. Yep, yep, yep. So Uncle Ted waves Thor off. His look of smug satisfaction just makes you want to punch him in the face.
Yeah, it is another great little moment from Pare, but I'll be honest, I always kind of felt like his switch from reluctant victim to complete asshole was kind of a bit sudden.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I guess there's only room for one alpha dog in the pack, right? In the script, this scene is written really wonderfully. So this is from the script. An anguished Janet holds her grief-stricken boy back. Thor tugs against the leash as the attendants hustle him towards the van. Thor barks, then his eyes widen. Uncle Ted steps out of the front door, his eyes on fire. Something scary, strange, and inhuman flickers in his eyes. He flashes a sickening grin to the dog as he watches the animal taken towards the van to the pound. Uncle Ted comes up from behind Mum and Brett and puts his arms around them possessively. He waves his fingers dismissively at the dog. Thor goes out of his mind. Suddenly he leaps and barks and howls, trying to warn the family. The chain gags him and cuts his air, but he thrashes against it. The men in the white uniforms struggle fiercely with the huge German shepherd as they try to haul him in the van. Brett is screaming hysterically in his mother's grip. Brett, Thor, Thor, Thor! Thor barks and barks, louder as he sees the pack walk dejectedly into the house. Uncle Ted lingers in the doorway. He waves bye-bye at the dog and closes the door. Oh, that son of a bitch, Lee.
Yeah, poor Thor. I mean, apparently the animal control guys here were actually played by his trainers, the dog's trainers. But man, that dog does give an Oscar-worthy performance here.
He does do very well, does do very well. Another doggy Oscar, I feel. To add insult to injury, in the very next scene, Uncle Ted sneaks off to urinate on Thor's empty kennel. And this is Ted's territory now, Lee.
Yeah, I mean, as we said, this is definitely kind of where the final act kicks off, I think.
Yeah, Thor taken to the pound and Ted's alpha pit. This is definitely Act 3.
We get a cool little scene in the script of Janet researching schizophrenia. I like it because it kind of gives her something to lean upon in regards to her suspicions. Obviously, she's not going to be like, "Oh, my brother's a werewolf," so she's trying to like reason it and think of something a bit more logical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Makes total sense. But it's supper time in the Harrison house and things are tense as hell. There's a cool moment with Ted asserting dominance over Brett.
Yeah, that line is missing from the script. Instead, Janet quickly removes her son from her brother's lap because she's clearly uneasy around him now.
Janet asks Ted where Marjorie is, and Ted casually lies that she's in Seattle. So night falls, and Brett, armed with a pair of wire cutters, climbs out of his window, grabs his bike, and rides off on a rescue mission.
Go, Brett.
Damn right, go Brett. Ted heads off into the woods, handcuffs in hand, and it's another full moon.
Isn't that like the fourth one this week?
Yeah, the lunar cycle does seem a little out of sync here, doesn't it? Despite the fact that Ted alluded to the fact that any moon will do. Did I say that right? I feel like I said that
I
wrong.
think so, yeah. Yeah. I was just kind of because you did make the point that like he said it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a full moon, but they do literally have like four full moons in like a in like a row in the script, yeah, and then like on like the in the movie, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, so the lunar cycle does seem a little out of sync here, doesn't it? Despite the fact Ted alluded to the fact that any moon will do, actually.
Yeah,
Unbeknownst to Ted, Janet is watching from the house. She grabs a gun, contemplates taking it, but then thinks better of it and heads out to confront her brother unarmed.
yeah. Take note, Chekhov, because we're going to be seeing that gun again soon.
Brett is pedaling for all he's worth. Man, that boy's on a mission. Janet, meanwhile, is wandering the woods in search of her brother. Brett reaches the pound and hops the fence in search of Thor. Now, back in the woods, Janet confronts Ted, who has no choice but to reveal his secret. He confesses that Thor was right. He was trying to protect them from him. We get some really cool practical effects in play as Ted is caught in the early stages of his transformation.
Yeah, he does go a little supervillain here, kind of ranting off a monologue about his evil ways, which is even longer in the script. But there's an interesting little tidbit of information here because there are actually two versions of this film, the theatrical and the director's cut. And depending on which version you're watching, this scene will play out a little differently. In the director's cut, Ted's transformation happens quite quickly and mostly off screen. Whereas in the theatrical cut, we are treated to some truly, truly awful CGI as Ted basically animorphs into the werewolf.
Not the best. So what you're saying, Lee, is the director's cut is actually shorter?
As far as I could tell, that is the only difference. Yeah.
Do you know what? I love the fact that he hated the scene so much. He waited like what 20 years to cut it. So the movie intercuts now between Janet fleeing the werewolf and Brett freeing Thor from the pound.
See, in the script, Thor is reluctant to leave his cage. He's still suffering from being called a bad dog, and he doesn't want to let anyone down again. It's only after he has like a memory flash of Uncle Ted that he bolts for freedom. And in another cool scene in the script, he actually leads Brett out of the pound to safety before he takes off running for home.
Oh, what a good boy he is, Lee.
Yeah.
So back to the film, and we're still intercutting between the two scenes. So the werewolf is hot on Janet's heels, and we get a wonderful little slow-mo shot of Thor leaping the pound fence to freedom. Everything is moving fast now. Thor's on a mission. Janet's running for her life. The soundtrack is banging as the werewolf closes in, and poor Brett's just trying to keep up.
Yeah. I mean, this is mostly written as it is in the script, except for in the script, we get Sheriff Jensen, who has been alerted to the jailbreak at the pound and is in hot pursuit of Thor and Brett in his police car.
So back on the screen, the pace hasn't let up. Janet makes it back inside and is able to grab the gun before the werewolf crashes through the window. Janet is able to dodge it and heads upstairs, but not before dropping a conveniently placed grandfather clock on his head.
Yeah, it does make a cracking dong when it hits as well. Oh man, cracking dong. That's a phrase I've never said before. In the script, it's a bookcase, but that wouldn't have made such an epic noise on collision. Also in the script, Sheriff Jensen swerves off road to avoid traffic and sinks the car into a ditch, making his whole presence here kind of pointless. So it's no surprise that it's not in the film.
Quite so. Janet makes it into Brett's room and slams the door behind her. But of course, Brett is actually half a mile up the street at this point. The werewolf crashes through the door. Here's Johnny Starr. And things look grim for Janet Lee. But in the nick of time, Thor arrives and takes the fight to the werewolf. And I mean, he really fucking goes for the werewolf in this moment here. I mean, I kind of felt bad for the guy in the suit, to be honest.
Fun fact, for the most part, this isn't actually our beloved Primo in action, rather an actual fucking Russian attack dog. They put the crew behind a perspex screen and just set the damn thing on the guy in the suit.
So I mean, it shows. Yeah, this fight is savage.
Yeah, I mean it's even more brutal in the script. There's a point where Thor actually tries to rip the werewolf's balls off.
Oh, Wolfman's got gnarly.
Brilliant. Indeed, he does, but not if Thor can help it.
The werewolf manages to put Thor out of action for a moment just as Brett arrives and runs slap bang into a furry claw. The werewolf lifts the boy up in a chokehold before Janet opens fire.
Yeah. Did you notice she fires 8 shots from a 6-round revolver?
I did not notice that, Lee. No.
Yeah. I looked it up just to be sure. Magic of cinema.
Well, indeed. The werewolf is looking pretty worse for wear now. The fight pretty much ripped out of it. But Thor is up and ready for round 2. The two face off again, and it looks like the fight could be over. But the werewolf snarls its vicious intent, and Thor launches himself like a missile and takes them both crashing through the window onto the backyard.
This is pretty much how it goes down in the script as well.
We get a hauntingly beautiful shot of Thor and the werewolf, both lying half dead, staring at one another. Neither has any fight left in them. The monster picks itself up and limps away into the woods, and after a moment, Thor follows. The sun rises, and Thor tracks down Uncle Ted, severely wounded and now in human form. The two share a long look before Ted tells Thor to finish him, and the dog obliges, Lee.
Yeah, I mean, in the script, we see Ted change back, and he has a couple of extra lines of dialogue, which I'm glad didn't really make it into the film, as I think the scene is just pretty much perfect the way it is.
Yeah, final repairs have been done on the house as Janet and Brett console Thor. All seems well until Thor werewolves out, Lee. But it's okay. It's only a cheap jump scare. All is well, and the film ends on a thoroughly happy note.
Oh, I hate that jump scare so much.
Did that one, that would get you, did it?
Ah, it got me. Every jump scare gets me. I'm a worse, but I just feel like it cheapens the ending a little bit. I don't know. How about you?
Yeah, well, it didn't bother me that much. I mean, I think in a way it sort of references a question I had about how this werewolf thing is transferred. So Ted seems to change after being scratched. Does the same happen to Thor?
Guess it's only like people that can be infected by
Oh, I
werewolves.
guess
Or
so. Not
then you'd be
sure.
like a were dog, which would kind of just be like a wolf. I don't know. Gets
Yeah.
confusing, but so hit me up with your thoughts, man. What did you think?
Well, I mean, honestly, I had loads of fun, Lee. I thought it was a cracking good watch. Like, really had fun. I thought like it was kind of goofy, and I was not quite so like enamored with the wolf costume as maybe you were. Maybe that's not fair. I mean, I think it was, I was less of a fan of how it was shot, I think, rather than the actual costume itself. I mean, I think it's very clearly shown and it's very sort of well lit. It's and kind of flatly lit at times, and I think maybe a bit more depth and a bit more darkness and shadow would have helped. I thought Pare and Hemingway were probably they looked like they're in a different film. So I mean, Mara Hemingway seems really kind of naturalistic, really authentic. And I think Pare just seems to be hamming it up a storm. I thought tonally it was a bit caught in the middle, but look, super fun. And again, I just, Lee, I got to thank you for easing me in with the on our horror journey with some really like fun movies, man.
Oh, man. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I mean, it does give us a hero that's impossible not to root for, right?
Oh man, totally, totally. So, look, what were your scariest moments?
For me, I think maybe not the scariest, but the most effective is that brutal opening sequence. I think it just kind of sets the stage for what's to come. And let's not forget at the heart, this is a family drama with added werewolf. And that opener just kind of tells us that, yeah, things might go a little melodrama at times, but things can and will go south very fast. And also for me, it's not so much a scary scene, but like the scene where Ted is just pouring his heart out to Janet, saying that he shouldn't be here, and you can kind of feel the pain he's in. Like I say, not really scary, but for me, I think it was quite haunting.
Yeah, I love Ted talking to Janet when he's on the turn as well. But most effective for me, I think, was again, it's not really scary, but most effective was the moment where Janet's pulling Thor away from Ted and locking him away. It's a really kind of visceral, naturalistic scene, and the dog is
Mm.
going for it, and you can
Yeah,
tell that Janet's really struggling. Like, I
yeah,
mean, it's a great job all round that scene. I thought that was
yeah,
really
absolutely,
outstanding.
absolutely. So, what was your standout? I mean, I have a feeling we're both going to be on the same page for this one.
Okay, well, I mean, for me, standout scene was the moment that Thor is running from the pound back home to save Janet. So I mean, at this point, it's all hell's breaking loose, and Thor is running down the road. He's dodging traffic, and he's left Brett in the dust. Brett can't keep up on his bike. And dude, I was literally like screaming, go on, Thor, fucking get home and get home and save Meryl Hemingway. Like it was totally like it was so great, man. I was totally shouting at the screen.
It really was a pulse pounder, wasn't it? But I think my favorite moment was the one with Thor and Ted just kind of battered and broken on the lawn, werewolf Ted this is, and they're just
Oh
kind of
yeah, yeah,
staring
yeah.
at each other, and neither of them's got any strength left to fight, and they're just kind of staring into each other's souls. I love that scene so much.
Yeah, there's something about that dog lying there, just battered and bruised, and just sort of,
Mm.
but still gets up and still keeps
Still
on
gets
going and
up.
is
Yeah, he
still
still
protecting the
gets up.
family, right? It's just
Mm.
beautiful if you're a dog owner, like some of these moments really kind of they get you right in the meow
Yeah,
meow.
yeah, it does. You kind of have to be a dog person, I think, to fully get the
Yeah,
feels sometimes.
I appreciate that. Yeah, yeah, totally. Okay, well, that's about it for this week. So, Lee, tell us what's on the agenda for next time.
Oh, that's a good one next week. So next week we're going to be taking a closer look at Sinister, Written by one of my all-time favorites, C.R. Cargill, and directed by Scott Derrickson, Sinister has been scientifically proven to be the scariest movie ever made.
To be honest, Lee, I'm not really looking forward to this one.
It's not as bad as it sounds, I promise. But it is a masterwork on tension and atmosphere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm excited to check it out. I think there's probably a lot to learn, but I probably am not going to enjoy the experience.
It's definitely one to watch with the lights out and sound up for full effect. So trust me on that, okay?
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see about that, I think. We'll see. So listen, if you enjoyed the podcast, please hit like and subscribe, and feel free to go out and check out our socials as well.
Yeah, we'll also have links to the scripts we've looked at in the show notes.
So until next time, take care.
And keep writing those scares.